Am I audible?
Sure, you are.
Okay, thank you. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Bhavnit Singh Batra, Assistant Professor in the Department of Economics in Devanagari Postgraduate College, Gulaothi, Bulandhshahr. I now humbly ask the presiding chair of this event, Professor N.K. Taneja, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Chaudhary Charan Singh University, Meerut, to kindly give his permission to start the event. Sir.
It's indeed a pleasure to welcome Shri N.K. Singh, the chief guest this forenoon. Also, Professor V.K. Malhotra from ICSSR and other distinguished members from the organizing committee. Since our guests have joined, we should start it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hello.
It is our holy tradition to worship our goddess Saraswati before we proceed.
Yes, it will be done. It will be done.
With any important academic event. It is our holy tradition to worship our goddess Saraswati before we proceed with any important academic event. So let us dedicate our prayers to Ma Saraswati by listening to Saraswati Vandana. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Department of Economics, Chaudhary Charan Singh University Meerut, and the Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi, it gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to the special lecture being organized today. We would like to extend our gratitude and warm welcome to our honored guest and the chief speaker. Today, we have among us the following distinguished dignitaries. Our esteemed chief speaker of this event, Shri N.K. Singh, Chairman of the 15th Finance Commission of India, the presiding chair of the event, Professor N.K. Taneja, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Chaudhary Charan Singh University, Meerut. We are extremely glad to have among us Professor Vimla Vai, Pro Vice Chancellor, CCS University, Meerut. We would like to extend a warm welcome to our special guest, Professor V.K. Malhotra, Member Secretary of the Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi. We would also like to acknowledge the gracious presence of Professor N.C. Lohani, Dean, Faculty of Arts, CCS University, Meerut. We are also honored to have among us Professor Dinesh Kumar, Head of Department, Department of Economics, CCS University, Meerut. And of course, the rocket propellant and booster of this event, my mentor and guide, the organizing secretary of this special lecture, Professor Atvir Singh, Department of Economics, CCS University, Meerut. Also, providing the technical nuts and bolts of this online event is Mr. Sandeep Agarwal, Network Administrator of CCS University, Meerut. We can't thank him enough for his kind assistance. Last but not the least, we take this opportunity to accord a cordial and warm welcome to all the participants who are attending this special lecture from different parts of the country. We hope that today's event inspires ideas and discussions around the ways that we can make our world a better place. I now call upon the organizing secretary of the event, Professor Atvir Singh, to enlighten us about the theme of the event and provide an introduction of the chief speaker, Shri N.K. Singh. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bhavnit. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Chaudhary Charan Singh University, Meerut, and my teacher, Professor N.K. Taneja, Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Y. Vimla, the Chief Speaker of the day, Chairman of 15th Finance Commission of India, Shri N.K. Singh, Member Secretary, ICSSR, New Delhi, and my colleague, Professor V.K. Malhotra, Dean Faculty of Arts, Professor N.C. Lohani, Head Department of Economics, Professor Dinesh Kumar, distinguished participants, teachers, friends, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear students. At the outset, I take this opportunity to request you all to please follow COVID-19 appropriate behavior and ask your friends, neighbors, and people around you to do that, as we all are facing a very difficult time due to this worldwide pandemic. We all are aware that the COVID-19 pandemic has led to unprecedented and unanticipated challenges requiring collective action and support. The topic of today's lecture, Center-State Fiscal Relations in India, is not only important but relevant also in the present scenario of the country. The center-state fiscal relations have their long history before the Government of India Act 1919 and 1935, and then leading to the Indian Constitution. Some constitutional amendments have also been carried out, which have affected the center-state fiscal relations in India. even before the adoption of the constitution, in the question of provincial autonomy was always in focus, and in this, the financial autonomy occupied a prominent place. There was always a conflict of interest between the center and the provinces. These included the issues of powers, functions, and expenditure responsibilities. The Government of India Act 1919 formalized the relations and provided for a division of legislative and administrative functions between the center and provinces. It decided to separate financial resources between the center and the provinces, uh, financial resources by dividing existing heads of revenues between them. The Government of India Act 1919 and devolution rules thereunder gave considerable latitude to provinces, but there was no separation of cash balances of the center and provinces. There was a single public account on which both center and states operated. The provision of the ways and means was the sole responsibility of the center. The provinces had no control over audit and account, borrowings and allied matters. Thus, though some autonomy was given to provinces, yet the center controlled most of the matters. But the arrangement on the basis of the Government of India Act 1919 was not working satisfactorily because of the lack of rational and acceptable distribution. The whole question of the division of revenue and taxation powers between the center and the provinces was examined by the High Power Taxation Inquiry Committee appointed in 1924. Simultaneously, a committee called the Reforms Inquiry Committee was also appointed under Alexander Madiman. This committee was to inquire into the difficulty arising out of implementation of provisions of the Government of India Act 1919. It recommended separation of audit and accounts. The separation scheme was introduced in 1924. The matter was also examined by the Simon Commission on Constitutional Reforms and Joint Committee of British Parliament, deliberated upon the recommendation of Simon Commission. The recommendations of the Joint Committee were embedded in the Government of India Act 1935, which was the major step in formulating the center-province relations. The most important issue under consideration at all stages was the division of revenue between center and the provinces. This question further engaged the attention of the various committees. In 1931, a white paper was issued embodying the government's proposal for constitutional reforms. Ultimately, the Government of India Act 1935 came into being, which generally embodied the federal concept of division of functions and resources. Thus, the passing of the Government of India Act 1935 was the major step in formalizing the center-province relations in India. But looking to the provisions of the Act, it is evident that central control over provinces was further strengthened and provinces' dependence on the center for finances indirectly increased. The Government of India Act 1935 was in operation when the Constituent Assembly started deliberations on the draft of the Constitution placed before it. N.R. Shankar Expert Committee was entrusted the task of incorporating the financial arrangements. The draft of the Constitution by and large had followed the provisions of Government of India Act 1935 regarding revenue sharing and expenditure. The draft also did not disturb the concept of shared revenues and retained the provisions for both obligatory and permissive sharing of few taxes. The Shankar Committee recommended the constitution of Independent Finance Commission to deal periodically with financial questions. The recommendation was incorporated in the draft of the Constitution. As in the Government of India Act 1935, the Constitution draft did not prescribe the shares as well as the basis of distribution. The framers of Indian Constitution, as the debates of Constituent Assembly show, relied heavily on the Government of India Act 1935 for the new constitutional framework. Though there was a difference of opinion about the strong center and the distinct decentralized provinces. In the final analysis, the Indian Constitution incorporated the features of centralization, the formation of central state and concurrent lists, the sharing of taxes and grants in aid were the subjects which were taken up from Government of India Act 1935. There are many articles in the Constitution which are more centralizing. Article 246, which deals with the central state and concurrent list, is one of them, which shows heavy centralization of sources of revenue in the central list, while larger responsibilities of expenditure on the state list. Another article is 249, which empowers the Rajya Sabha to transfer legislative jurisdictions to the center. Article 250, 353A, and Article 354 are some of few examples of centralized tendencies of the Constitution. Since the beginning of the Constitution in 1950, a number of problems and conflicts have arisen in the central state fiscal relations in India. Some issues remain unsettled that guide the current and undercurrents of political economy in India. Such issues become more vocal in multi-party polity like India, where around half of the states are governed by the political party different from one ruling at the center. Fiscal federalism is a subject of interesting debate in India, more so in view of recent developments of historical importance like 73rd and 74th Amendment Act 1992, forming the third year of the federal polity of India. Furthermore, the Constitution 80th Amendment Act 2000 significantly changed the manner of distribution of central tax collections between the center and state governments. Prior to this amendment, income tax and union excise duties were the only taxes shared with the states. This amendment altered the pattern of sharing of central taxes between the center and the states by providing for the sharing of the net proceeds of all union taxes and duties with the states. Still further, the Constitution 88th Amendment Act 2003 has included taxes on services under entry 92C in the union list in the 7th schedule of the Constitution. Further centralizing tendency occurred with the introduction of goods and services taxes. Although the division of taxation powers between the center and the states is clear-cut, it is not so in the case of economic activities. A number of economic functions fall in the concurrent list, and those which belong to the state list, many are subject to the provisions of the union list. Such situation is partly due to original scheme of the Constitution and partly due to subsequent amendments. There are a number of central legislation, the compliance and enforcement cost of which are entirely borne by the states. Central legislation such as the Environment Protection Act, the Wildlife Protection Act, the Forest Conservation Act, the Biodiversity Conservation Act, the Tribal Conservation Act, and many other national policies require compliance on the part of states. The federal fiscal relations in India have always been affected by a number of conflicts and issues. The reasons for these may be explored in the constitutional design and the multi-party polity. Moreover, the advent of new economic regime in the form of liberalization, privatization, and globalization has provided new dimensions to the center-state relations in India. The vertical fiscal imbalance caused by increasing level of expenditure obligations of the state and their inadequate revenue resources on the one hand, and the surplus of resources with the center due to rising tax revenue and less responsibilities on the other. Consequently, states have been demanding an increase in their share of central taxes further to 50%. Successive finance commissions have recognized that state governments necessarily require more resources to fulfill their obligations, which is why the share of tax revenues to be devolved to states has been steadily increasing across such commissions from 29.5% in the 11th Finance Commission to as much as 42% in the 14th Finance Commission. The 15th Finance Commission also put it at the 42%. It is 41 plus 1% due to the one state, Jammu and Kashmir, has been converted into a union territory. But the central government used the obvious available loopholes in the constitution. While tax revenues are to be shared with the states, cesses and surcharges are exempt. Using this loophole, the central government has been increasing the share of taxes collected through such cesses and surcharges, and therefore reducing the share of states in the total divisible pool. In fact, the share of the states never reached the mandated 42% even in the peak years. Thereafter, it has been suppressed as the central government moved to redirect its additional resources mobilization to the cesses and surcharges that it could zealously regard as its own. During 2021, the share of these, that is cesses and surcharges in total tax collection, is estimated to be more than 15%. In last few years, centralizing tendency occurred with the introduction of the goods and service taxes, which effectively denied state governments any ability to raise their own revenues other than through sales tax on alcohol and excise duties on fuel, which are exempt from GST. As a result, states are now dependent on the center for nearly half of all their resources. And because the GST rates are also not in their hands, they have no control over more than 2/3 of their revenues. The power imbalances between center and states comes not only from the fact that the center can control borrowing by the states under the constitution, it is also due to the fact that in financial markets, the states typically face worse conditions and their debt is more expensive. Furthermore, the pandemic has worsened the conditions they face in bond markets. In order to mobilize more financial resources, it is necessary that both the center and state should adopt stringent measures to avoid tax evasion, smuggling, black money, hoarding, etc. In view of the above observations and suggestions, if necessary, relevant articles in the Constitution should be amended so as to provide stable and rational financial relations between the states and the center in India. The inbuilt imbalance in the Constitution regarding sources of revenue and expenditure responsibilities between center and state is sought to be remedied by the institution of Central Finance Commission. Since the adoption of the Constitution of India, 15 finance commissions have been constituted at a regular interval of every 5 years. These commissions have given their recommendations on the tricky issues involving center-state fiscal relations. It is our privilege and a matter of great pride that today we have with us a very distinguished scholar of fiscal federalism in India. Let me say a few words about his introduction. Shri N.K. Singh is a prominent Indian economist, academician, and policymaker. He is currently chairman of the 15th Finance Commission, a body established under the Indian Constitution to oversee revenue sharing and other federal fiscal policy matters. Prior to this position, he presided as chairman of the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Review Committee, responsible for setting targets for the government to reduce fiscal deficits. He also served as a member of the upper house of the parliament, the Rajya Sabha, from 2008 to 2014, during which time he contributed to several prominent parliamentary standing committees, including the Public Accounts Committee, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and the Committee on Human Resource Development. Mr. Singh had a long and distinguished career as a member of the Indian Administrative Services before his entry into politics and fiscal policy leadership. He served as Expenditure Secretary during 1995-96, Revenue Secretary during 1996-98, and Secretary to Prime Minister of India during 1998 to 2001, among other senior leadership roles. He was part of the core group of advisors and strategists uh, during India's economic reforms of 1991, where he was principal interlocutor for negotiations with the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. Mr. Singh brings a wealth of national and international experience to the table, having interacted closely with multilateral organizations such as the World Bank, IMF, Asian Development Bank, and OECD. His early work as First Minister, Economic and Commercial Indian Embassy, Japan, during 1981 to 85, and subsequent contributions to the international economic order were recognized by the Emperor of Japan with the award of the Order of the Rising Sun, gold and silver. In 2016, the Japanese order is the second highest civilian award accorded to people with distinguished achievements in the field of international relations, promotion of Japanese culture, development in welfare, or preservation of the environment. He was the only Indian in the list of recipients of 2016 Spring Imperial decorations. On the academic front, he is a member of the governing body of the Nalanda University and chairperson of its endowments committee. He is also a member of the Indian Advisory Board of the London School of Economics. Mr. Singh has been a recurring eminent guest lecturer at prestigious academic institutions and universities like Columbia, Yale, Stanford, and the London School of Economics. Mr. Singh is also a published author with several prominent books to his name. Politics of Change, an insight into India's politics and economy, provides incisive insights into the realities of coalition politics and international fault lines, not by reason alone. Comments on the past and present of the politics of change and the new Bihar, rethinking development. His autobiography, Portraits of Power, Half a Century of Being at Ringside, was published in 2020. He has been a reputed columnist in leading Indian newspapers, including the likes of Hindustan Times, Hindustan, the Indian Express, the Hindu, and the Mint. Uh, I hope we will be enlightened by his brilliant deliberations on such tricky issues relating to uh, center-state fiscal relations. Over to you, Bhavnit.
Thank you very, very much, sir. We now move on to the special lecture by our esteemed speaker. But before we do that, I would like to share with you the details of the questions and the answers session that will follow the lecture. Please note, we shall take up the questions immediately after the lecture. I request you to please formulate your questions, frame them, and type them in the chat box. We will take up your questions from the chat box itself. So I repeat, kindly type your questions in the chat box. So ladies and gentlemen, we rarely get this kind of opportunity to listen to the words of a great knowledgeable speaker, Shri N.K. Singh. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible, clearly audible.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me begin by expressing my profound gratitude to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, whose idea it was to share my thoughts and my experiences with this prestigious university, which is really one of the centers of academic excellence in this part of the world. Let me pay tribute to the leadership of the Vice Chancellor, an eminent economist himself, who has very kindly thought of having this interaction so that particularly his economics, sociology, and political science students would have some idea of the evolving dynamics of fiscal federalism in India. So my gratitude to him first. Second, I'm most grateful to Atvir Singh. I think that he is a very good student and he has been mentored very well by the Vice Chancellor, as he mentioned. He gave us an outstanding account of the evolution of fiscal federalism in India and has touched on the most important issues in the evolution process, including touched upon some of the important challenges which successive finance commissions have faced. So my compliments to you, Atvir, for having done this very good research and having put together your ideas in an exceedingly cogent way. I'm also grateful to all the organizers who have put together an event under these challenging times. We are passing through very challenging times, and it is indeed a tribute to the Vice Chancellor and all those connected with the organizers that they adhered to the time frame and the schedule which they had mentioned to me for purposes of today's interaction. I want today's interaction to be an interactive one, and I want this lecture to be able to generate some public debate, because the purposes of all such interaction must be to generate debate. So let me make a few, with these words, a few broad remarks on the evolution of the center-state relations in general and fiscal federalism in particular. Now, as was very correctly pointed out by Atvir, India is not a union, it's not a confederation of states. It is in the constitution a union of states. There's a difference. because a union of states, the union is indestructible, but the ingredients of the union can be changed with more states being created as not. In the case of some other countries, for a long time, for instance, the United States was a confederation before it also moved towards becoming an indestructible union. So being a union of states, it has a written constitution. There are division of powers between different layers of government. Each state has its own separate legislature. They have their own judiciary. Many of them have a bicameral system. And the evolution of this, as was pointed out by Atvir very correctly, is embedded in the Government of India Act of 1919, which really classified the revenue between the center and the provinces, but was more deeply embedded in the Government of India Act of 1935, which really had the sharing of center's revenues and the grants in aid. The overall fiscal federal architecture was embedded in the Government of India Act of 1935. In a sense, therefore, when this act was coming into play, the Finance Commission of India, which currently I have as the 15th Finance Commission's chairman, the privilege to chair, is older than the Indian Constitution. Because if you look at the debates of the Constituent Assembly, you'll find that there was a prevarication on what should be the modalities in which the resources which were there should be shared between the center and the states. And therefore, before the adoption of the Constitution, there was an interim finance commission. This interim finance commission assigned the resources to be shared between the provinces and the union. Between 1949 to the adoption of the Constitution, it was headed by a very distinguished former finance minister, C.D. Deshmukh. So after that, the first finance commission was constituted under a distinguished economist, K.C. Niyogi, and since then, under the Constitution, this has been an unbroken tradition. So as we look at this, I will come to the challenges later. Since I am the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission, I will first part of it, let me explain the rationale of the recommendations we made and what the action the government has taken. As you know, under Article 280 of the Constitution, the Finance Commission, as correctly pointed out by Atvir, has to be constituted every 5 years by the President. And what is mandatory is the Constitution every 5 years. The Constitution doesn't say for what period the Finance Commission has to give its award. That is contained in a separate presidential notification and not under the provision of the Constitution. Now, what else does the Constitution say? The Constitution says that this Finance Commission has two important responsibilities. First, what is called the vertical. The vertical under Article 280 is looking at all resources taken together. What part of the resources should be retained by the union government and what part of it should really be spared for what was known as provinces earlier, now to the states of India. It used to be 29 and now to the 28 states. So this is function 1, which is called the vertical function. Function 2, having assigned the total resources, which will go to the states, what should be the formula which should determine, and the norms which should determine, the division of these among and between the states? That is also a second important function. The third function, which subsequently got added to these, is something that was alluded to, namely that after the constitutional amendments, the resources which can be considered to be assigned to the third tier of government, namely to urban local bodies and to rural local bodies. The Constitution also says that any other function assigned to the Finance Commission by the President in the interest of sound finance. Now, it has always happened that each Finance Commission has been assigned some separate area. We had really been assigned a number of such areas on which we were expected to give our recommendations. Also, I may wish to point out that apart from Article 280, there is another very important article of the Constitution, which is Article 275, that relates to what is called the grants in aid, namely that it is up to the Commission to consider that to give any special grant to a state, what has come to be historically known as the revenue deficit grants, and I'll come to the revenue deficit grants in a minute, that is a latitude to be given. There's another important function which got added subsequently after the enactment of the Disaster Management Act of 2005. Successive commissions have been asked to really assign some resources for the National Disaster Management Fund and the State Disaster Management Fund as a sharing formula between the center and the states. So these are the functions, broadly speaking, of the commissions in general, its evolution, as was correctly pointed out by Atvir, that till the constitutional amendment, 80th constitutional amendment, enacted in year 2000, at the time of Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the divisible pool had really different ingredients. Some ingredients, income tax, excise, and some other taxes. It was only in the constitutional amendment, the 80th constitutional amendment in the year 2000, that the basket of the divisible pool got enlarged to include all taxes, but then with a rider leaving out some areas, particularly cess and surcharge. I will deal with it in a Q&A session a little later. So then, having done that, we come to three important words which I would like you to grasp. Something which is, first word is something called the GRR, the gross revenue receipt of all revenues pooled together. This includes everything. So this for the 5-year projections which we made and the award for which we made, namely my commission, which gave 2 reports. First, it gave a report for the year 2021 only, given this sluggishness of the economy. And then it has given a report for the year 21-26. As far as my report for 2021 is concerned, that's now behind us. That is fully implemented, and I'd not like to comment on that. The next part is the award for the period of the 5 years, 21 to 26. So up to 26, you will have to live, or the country will have to live under the shadow, benign or not so benign, of the award which I have given and which the government has accepted. So having given this, I'd like to therefore use 3 words. The word of GRR, gross revenue receipts, which is of all the revenues taken together, and the projection which we made for the 5 years was 153.4 lakh crores based on the scenario and analysis contained in the report. If I may point out about the report itself for a minute, with your permission, that this report has been given this time in 4 volumes. Volume 1 contains the main volume. Volume 2 contains the statistical companion, which is inevitable. Volume 3 is really, on the union itself, namely what should different ministries do, what should be a roadmap, and so on and so forth, that they should have in their reform program. And there is this time another unique one, volume 4, which deals with the states. Each state I have subjected to very, very detailed, careful analysis, and each state has been given a certain roadmap of purposes of economics. So these are the 4 volumes of the report. I've had the privilege of sending it to the Honorable Vice Chancellor, a full set of the report which he has received. There is also a companion one called the Summary of Recommendations. The report itself is entitled A Finance Commission in COVID Times Report for 21-26. So coming back to where I was, the gross revenue receipts for the 5 years on the basis of the projections which I made was 153.4 lakh crores. Now, out of this, you take out things like the payment of the dividend by the Reserve Bank of India to the central government. You take out issues like the repayments by public sector undertakings to the government of India itself. You take out all those things which is entirely in the domain of the central government. And from 153 lakh crore, you'll get another nomenclature. From GRR, you come to GTR, the gross tax revenue. So this GTR, net of all those things which I mentioned, RBI dividend, payments by PSUs to central government, etc., you from 153.4 lakh crores, you come to a gross tax revenue of 135.4 lakh crores. Now, out of this, as I pointed out, after the constitutional amendment in 2000, the 80th constitutional amendment, you take out cess and surcharge. So this 135.4 lakh crores then gives you the third figure, which is the divisible pool. So first you had the GRR, 153.4 lakh crores. Then you have the GTR, which was 135.4 lakh crores. Then you come to the divisible pool, which is the pool on which I have to take a view on it. And that came to 103 lakh crores. Of course, whether or not cess and surcharge should be included is something that I'll be happy to address in a Q&A session. But my mandate was therefore how and in what manner this 103 lakh crores I should do a vertical on this. Namely, what part of it should go to the central government and what percentage should we get to the state governments. Now, as was correctly pointed out by Atvir, that successive finance commissions have incrementally been raising the share to the states. So it used to be for a very long time, 27%, 29%, 31%, 33%. Then from 33%, the 14th Finance Commission, under a colleague of mine, Dr. Venugopal Reddy, which is also a batch, we joined the service together, Venu and I are good friends, he's also a good academician. He suddenly raised it from 33% to 42%. Now that really came as a shock and awe to everybody, because never in the past had there been such a quantum change from which had moved only incrementally upwards. So then the issue became that 42%, should I shave it down? Should I shave it up? Issues were clear. Atvir pointed out that state governments would have been happier if it was 50-50. No state government where I went, and I visited all the states, said that it should be kept same. All argued that it should be increased. The central government at the same time was already reeling under huge fiscal pressures and had with difficulty swallowed the 42% given by the 14th Finance Commission. And so I had to balance all these considerations out which I'm sharing with you, but I opted for stability, continuity, and predictability. I retained it at 42%, which were netted for the fact of J&K, because the 29 states of India had now become 28 states, came to 41%, which is what the award that I have given. Now, 41% of 103 lakh crores already gives a kind of a figure in the ballpark region of about 41 lakh crores. Then I used my discretion. By using the discretion under Article 275 of the Constitution, by giving 3 more awards. One, I calculated that some states may be a big loser in terms of the norms which I applied on expenditure, and after making projections for the best projections for their revenue. So I have decided to give an award of 2.9 lakh crores by way of revenue deficit grants, which details have been given. The bulk of this is going to some of the southern states. You'll ask me why to southern states. It is going for the southern states because if you remember, many of the students, particularly I'm sure that the Vice Chancellor and Atvir will remember, that when my commission was constituted by the President, there was a controversy on whether I was doing the right thing in using the population data, census data of 2011 instead of 1971 data. I'll come to that controversy little later because these are some of the challenges. So anyway, I decided to use that. So 2.95 lakh crores have gone by way of revenue deficit grants. To the third tier of government, I had an option, to be quite honest with you people. I had an option of not giving anything at all. Because under the Constitution, the Constitution says that the Finance Commission will make appropriate recommendations to states on how to augment the consolidated fund of the state for purposes of assigning resources to the third tier. So technically, all that I could have done was tell the state governments, you people haven't acted on the State Finance Commission's recommendations, and therefore I'm giving you nothing. You go ahead and do that. But I didn't take that view. I took the view that ever since this constitutional amendment, each finance commission has given resources to the third tier. Indeed, the third tier have come to depend in a preponderant way on the awards of the Finance Commission. And I decided to give a hefty increase onto the third tier, coming to 4.22 lakh crores. I also decided to give, I'll come to that, how I have assigned that. I also decided to give money to the Disaster Management Fund, a hefty amount, looking at the vulnerabilities and the kinds of disasters. And incidentally, pandemic has been included by the Home Ministry as an admissible expenditure for disaster management. So when you add the roughly 10 lakh crores, which I have given, to the 41%, the net figure between the union and the states comes roughly in the ballpark of 50-50. Atvir, you should have mentioned one more aspect, and that, if you do so in a subsequent lecture, will add to the totality. There are non-finance commission receipts which state governments get. These are by way of what is known as centrally sponsored schemes. Now, what are these centrally sponsored schemes? They have a history. So one of the issues which I mentioned to you, which I'll come to when I come to challenges, is that under the 7th schedule of the Constitution, there are many subjects which were assigned to states
I think we seem to have lost him. We'll get back to you soon. We seem to have lost connection with Singh sir. We'll just get in touch with him and get back to you soon. Please wait. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Am I okay?
Hello, sir. Hello, you're audible, sir. You're back.
I'm back.
Thank God.
Okay. Sorry about it. It was a connectivity issue on my part.
Yes.
So, so as I said, I gave to the Disaster Management Fund, and if you look at the broad totality, therefore, of the divisible pool of 103 lakh crores, broadly speaking, it's in the ballpark of close to 50%. Add to it the resources for centrally sponsored schemes on which the central government spends each year 3.5 lakh crores must be get added to this. So if you do all that in a certain sense, you get to the figure roughly of 50-50. So this is the broad architecture by which I did the vertical. Now I'm going to say a word on the horizontal. So on the horizontal, as I was mentioning, that when this Finance Commission was constituted, there was, as you know, a big controversy that the president had asked me to use the census data of 2011. Right from the 6th Finance Commission, that is for the period 1974 to 1979, all finance commissions were using the census data of 1971. So for 40 years, the census data of 1971 was used. For the first time after 40 years, the president instructed me to use the population data of 2011. And since every finance commission for the resources between the states have given some marks to population, many southern states had a serious apprehension that they would be a big loser if I were to use the data of 2011 and not the data of 1971, because they had managed their demography better, and states like UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, particularly the northern states, the population and demographic management had remained very weak. So there was this challenge. So I had to use some ingenuity in how to distribute it among the states. So among the states, the criteria that I have used, which takes care of this difficulty which I used, I reduced the share of weightage out of 100 I'm talking about, the weightage to population, by reducing it to giving a data of only weightage of only 15% based on the 2011 census data. Then I used in terms of the horizontal distribution, namely which state will get how much, I divided it into 3 baskets: need, performance, and equity. On the criteria of the needs, I gave for population 15%. I gave for area, because area represents a need. Larger the area, more money you need. I gave another 15%. Forest and ecology, for the first time, had been given a figure of 7.5% by the earlier Finance Commission, looking at the special difficulties in environmental and other preservations, that I increased to 10%. So 15, 15, 10, that makes it 40%. So this is the needs basket. The second basket I used was equity, namely clearly states which are very poor, where per capita income is well below the national averages, they needed a special consideration and more resources to be able to improve the life quality, social infrastructure, physical infrastructure. And every finance commission had assigned a reasonable weightage. I assigned a weightage not as high as some of the earlier ones, but 45%. So that is the equity. So first part was needs, population, area, forest, and ecology. Second part was equity. Income distance, I assigned 45%. How do I calculate income distance? Namely, the distance between the lowest per capita income and the highest per capita income. The highest per capita income, as you know, is of Goa, but Goa is really a very small state, so I had to look to a larger state. So really, as a surrogate, I used Haryana and the income distance from Haryana and measurement by the inverse of that. And that I assigned a weightage of 45%. Then I had a third basket for the first time. That was called efficiency and performance. So I gave, for the first time, introduced a new criteria called demographic management and assigned a weight of 12.5%. This was to mitigate the impact of using the population data of 2011 and not the population data of 1971. I assigned really a weightage of 12.5%, and then I gave a 2.5% weightage to fiscal and to tax efforts to reward their improvement in their fiscal management and in terms of their tax evasion. So this way I arrived at the breakup of the 100. I've told you about, therefore, the vertical. I've told you about the breakup of the horizontal. Now, as far as the third tier is concerned, namely the 4.2 lakh crores, in the third tier of government, I have increased the number, but I have been somewhat tilted in favor of the urban local bodies marginally than the rural local bodies. So in the urban local bodies, I divided all of urban local bodies into three: cities with a population of a million plus, city between 100,000 and 1 million, and cities below 100,000. So for cities of million and plus, for the first time, I introduced an important criteria of pollution and environmental management and giving a kind of a challenge fund of those cities which improved pollution. I also assigned weightages for the use of these resources for national priorities like drinking water, open defecation, sewage management, and common areas, leaving some resources free for the ongoing activity. For the 100,000, the pollution criteria was not there, but the other national priority criteria were kicked in, and of course, much larger resources without any additionalities. For the rural local bodies too, I've assigned a reasonable proportion of what are called tied funds, tied to national priorities, which I mentioned, namely drinking water supply, management of fecal matter, open defecation, sanitation, drainage, and rainwater recycling, and so on. So the broad structure of this 4.22, for the first time, I might also introduce that since the title of my report is Finance Commission in Pandemic Times, what have I done to address the pandemic times? For the first time, my report has a robust chapter on the health sector. And out of the resources of 4.22 lakh crores that I've assigned to the third tier, 75,000 crores is assigned to improving the quality of health infrastructure at the third tier of government. Namely what? Primary health centers, separate things for infectious diseases, laboratory and testing, which will really incentivize and help the third tier in meeting and mitigating the health sector deficiencies, which we are currently seeing, particularly in some of the states like Bihar and UP. So this is as far as the third tier is concerned. On the disaster management, which are concerned, I have taken into account the disaster, but increased the amount of resources for the State Disaster Management Fund and the National Disaster Management Fund, which will greatly enhance the resources of the states for purposes of managing their disaster. On the whole, what do I think of this? On the whole, I believe that looking at the current context, looking at unpredictability, and looking at the uncertainties which lie ahead, and since Taneja Sahab, I cannot pretend to be an astrologer, I can only seek to be an econometrician with policy framework. I have done what I believe is appropriate in balancing needs and balancing needs with equity, efficiency in a fair and reasonable way. And as I go forward, what are some of the critical undecided areas? And I'll touch very briefly on that and then I'll stop. I think that there are, in my view, 5 critical areas on which, as we go forward, the center-state relations and the architecture of the federal polity would depend. First one, the unsettled state of the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Now, all of you know what is the 7th schedule. So as I had mentioned, India is a union of states, but not a confederation of states. It is a written constitution. And in that written constitution, the 7th schedule defines the powers of the union, namely powers and obligations of the union, the powers and obligations of the states, and those which fall in this omnibus category called the concurrent list. Atvir was right that the concurrent list has got somewhat increased with the constitutional amendments by adding some subjects like forest ecology and family planning and environment in this list. But broadly speaking, this is list 1, list 2, list 3. In practice, however, what has happened is that with the prevalence of so many centrally sponsored schemes, the architecture of the 7th schedule of the Constitution has got exceedingly cluttered. We are on a cluttered chessboard and not the clean slate. So what subjects the state should do, suddenly a centrally sponsored scheme is taken up. Give you an example, and I think that we referred to some of these things. Let me give you an example. Whose responsibility should be to educate people? The center or the states? So under the Constitution, it is assigned to the states. Yet, much before this government came, you had a Right to Education Act, which was a standalone legislation enacted by Parliament, which was therefore really the Right to Education Act really led to the first version of the Sarvasya Shiksha Abhiyan and its subsequent kind of amendments, creating in the nature of an entitlement scheme. Whose responsibility should be to provide employment? Perhaps the state, where people are living. And yet the Manrega Act has created a standalone legislation for doing that. Whose obligation should it be to provide drinking water? Perhaps the states. And yet you now have an important centrally sponsored schemes for drinking water, pipe drinking water to the states. So if you see that the architecture and the design of the 7th schedule of the Constitution has got exceedingly cluttered by overlapping of central and federal obligations. And if you ask me, some of the controversy relating to center-state relations are embedded in the clutter of the 7th schedule of the Constitution. And complicated to this 7th schedule are the standalone legislations of Parliament, illustratively, food, right to food, on employment, on education, to mention a few. So this is the first big challenge of the future of center-state relations as we go forward. The second challenge is a challenge of Article 282 of the Constitution. Now, if you look at Article 282 of the Constitution, and if you go to the Constituent Assembly debates, you will find that there was a big debate. Or shall we have this? Shall we not have this? So it was kept as a contingent provision that the state government or the central government can assign any resources in public welfare or in public necessity for such purposes as they may define. It is under this Article 282 that the erstwhile Planning Commission had created the structure of the centrally sponsored schemes, which are still continuing. I feel many of these centrally sponsored schemes have outlived their utility. I made a recommendation earlier, my earlier capacity. I made a recommendation in my present capacity for a deep rationalization of the centrally sponsored schemes, which the finance minister and the government has accepted, and that hopefully will be underway. But the whole idea of Article 282 of the Constitution and the 211 centrally sponsored schemes under 29 umbrella schemes is an area which is a clutter in the center-state relations. The third important challenge is that while the Finance Commission existed as a pre-constitutional body and has existed throughout the Constitution, after the adoption of the GST, the constitutional amendment was made for the constituting a GST council. Now, what is the GST? Why is the GST relevant? Well, it is relevant because state governments, bulk of the state government's taxes are subsumed now under the GST. All state excise, all those things have been put under the central GST. So the Finance Commission, which looks into revenues of states and revenues of the center, is deeply connected with the revenues of what comes from the GST. And the GST Council now is a permanent constitutional body which looks into these. So what should be the future relationship between a principal constitutional finance body like the Finance Commission and the GST Council, which is empowered to take all issues of the indirect taxes and has subsumed it? Indeed, I think that Atvir did mention about the availability of resources for the third tier. I myself realized the reason why I increased the grant to the third tier is because a lot of their revenue sources had been subsumed under the GST. They were left with very few free resources. And that is why I introduced the idea of property tax as being one of the areas which could be done. So the issue of the relationship between the GST Council and the Finance Commission is an issue. The fourth important issue, which is a challenge, is the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment, and for how long and in what manner should the third tier be found resources. Because this constitutional functions assigns the 3 Fs: functions, finance, and functionaries to be assigned by state government to the third tier. But that is an area on which there is huge uncertainty. And the final issue, which remains a challenge, is the asymmetry in terms of unsettled fiscal issues. Now, on the issue of fiscal policy, we have given a fiscal framework, but there is a provision under the Constitution, under Article 293(3) of the Constitution. No state government can borrow without a prior permission of the central government. This has been inserted as long as the state government owes something to the central government in one form or the other, and all states owe something in one form or the other. So they'll have to take a permission. So each state government has enacted their own fiscal responsibility management legislation. The central government, based on my recommendations of the FRBM Act, amended. The original one was in 2001. The one that I gave was the amended one adopted in 2017-18, has also these. So what should be the asymmetry in the powers of the center and the state when it comes to the application of Article 293(3) of the Constitution, and who should be in charge of these enforcements? We are living in unsettled times. The future of India's fiscal federalism, the future of center-state relations, in my view, are currently being tested as we wade through a great pandemic. So I think that many of these issues are of a fundamental nature, and they will come, we will have to confront them, even when hopefully this pandemic, which is huge surge we see, will begin to abate. The challenges which I have mentioned will be the ongoing principal challenges to deal with the future of India's federal relationship. The future of our federation will be contingent on the manner, modality in which these issues are to be addressed. At the end of the day, all federal relations are embedded in trust and in hope. In fostering trust is where the future lies. And trust must be nurtured and it must be endeared. It is that which gives me hope that India's center-state relations are embedded both in hope and in trust. And it is keeping in view this broad framework that my commission has done and fulfilled its constitutional obligation of submitting to the President the recommendations of my commission for the 5 fiscal years 21 to 26. Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you, and I'll be happy to address any questions which you might have. I'll try to be as brief as possible. Thank you very much, Bhavnit, for anchoring this. Thank you, Vice Chancellor, and thank you, Atvir, for an excellent summary of the current state of play. It was my privilege to be able to speak to you, your distinguished faculty, to your students, and to all others who have spared their very valuable time in challenging times like this to give me this remarkable opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your profound knowledge with us. Your lecture was full of zeal and valuable information. Let us start with the question hours session. We already have some questions with us, but I will first give you the question raised by Professor Dinesh Kumar, who's the head of department of our university, of Department of Economics. And the question goes like this: does the Finance Commission of India have any interventions in the governance and monitoring of the allocated amount to the center and states? Please enlighten us.
Thank you very much. I think it's a brilliant question. It's a brilliant question. Why? Because one of the recommendations which we have made in this Finance Commission is that to monitor the implementation of the resources assigned by us, they should constitute an ongoing and a continuing framework of an empowered committee to look into the implementation of our recommendations and to submit a report to government and to parliament each year. Now, the central government has not rejected this. The central government, in the action taken report, has said that this recommendation made by the Finance Commission, which is recommendation number 103 of my Finance Commission, is receiving their serious consideration. Hopefully, if they accept this, you would have a monitoring mechanism. Because if I may read, with your permission, the exact recommendation, which is recommendation, 101, says that a high-powered intergovernmental group, I'm using the word intergovernmental because it should deal with the center and the states, should be constituted to task to oversee the implementation of the recommendations of the Finance Commission. This recommendation is under the serious consideration of the central government. If they accept it, that will be addressing the issue which you have raised. Thank you for raising this.
Thank you, sir. So there's another question by Vatsala. She asks, the 14th and the 15th Finance Commission have included forest cover in their terms of reference. This is a big step, but much less talked about. Could you throw light on this? And could you tell in quantitative terms how much the states are getting for maintaining their forest cover? So that's the question from Vatsala, sir.
Thank you, Vatsala. Thank you, because you are making me nostalgic. Because let me, on a lighter side, anecdotally tell you. Let me tell you that what touched my heart was the fact that when the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand decided to take me from Dehradun on a helicopter to show me the forest cover of the rich state of Uttarakhand and some amount of deforestation that I saw, I was saying that what a rich forest cover you have. He said, sir, the truth is that I cannot utilize this forest. But these and the Ganges and Gangotri Valley, these are the lungs of India, which enables India to breathe. We have to spend the resources to maintain them. We cannot harness their economic gains. So there is a disconnect, sir, between potential and harnessing it. And your earlier Finance Commission, 14th, introduced forest cover and gave a marking of 7.5. Please continue with that, sir, keeping in view what you are seeing and how much resources we are spending to maintain these forests. Similar story when I went to the Northeast and I traveled deep in, by the way, we covered India in its entirety. I mean, I certainly say that I may or may not be globally traveled, but I'm certainly well traveled in India. In remote Nagaland, in parts of Meghalaya, which are deep forests, which they cannot harness for ecological and other reasons, but on which they have to resource. So this touched me. I not only continued with the award of the 14th Finance Commission, I decided to increase it from 7.5 to 10%, which will enable them the financial resources, hopefully to be gainfully utilized for purposes of maintaining the forest, making scant forest into moderate forest, and moderate forest into dense forest. Because what constitutes forest also is there is a huge literature and there is a huge controversy on that. But yes, Vatsala, this touched my heart and the heart of the Commission, that we not only retained it, we increased the resources available to states for maintenance of forest in the overall interest of India's ecology and environment.
Thank you, sir. Now there are two questions by Shilpa, Chaudhary, and Ashika. I think they can be put in the same group. So these questions goes like this. Sir, is the federal structure getting weakened recently with the center trying to increase the cess and reducing the state's share? Or in your opinion, what is your opinion on states demanding 50% share of divisible pool? Don't you think that the states have a greater role to play and they need much more fiscal space? So these two questions, I combined them from Shilpa Chaudhary and Ashika from Kerala.
Thanks, Shilpa. Thanks, Atisha. Thanks, Chaudhary, for asking this question. I have grappled with this issue. Now, there are three parts to your question. First part of your question is the federal structure getting weakened? Second, how much is cess undercutting the award of the 15th Finance Commission or my Finance Commission? And third, of course, which you have really asked, that what should be the way forward out of that, and the 50% shouldn't they get of all the resources which are assigned. So I'll take them in the same order. So as far as 50% is concerned, you remember of the divisible pool of 103 lakh crores, when you look at what I have assigned in the 41 or 42%, plus you add to it what I have given by way of grants of 10 lakh crores, if you add the two together, you are getting a ballpark number close to around 50% out of the 103 lakh crores of the divisible pool. So that constitutes my reply to your 50-50 sharing. But your question is a deeper one. That yes, you are doing that, 103 lakh crores, but then what about the cess? The cess, there is absolutely no doubt that in the cess between the period 2010 and 11, as a percentage of the divisible pool, has gone up from 10.4% to 19.9% if you look at the budget estimates of 2021. Now, so you would say that the cess actually has been doubled in the period between 2010-11 and 2020-21. And this is outside the divisible pool. Well, I'll make two comments on it. First and foremost, that to some extent, this 19.9 is an exaggeration, because this 19.9 also includes the compensation cess under the GST, which is going entirely to the states for purposes of ensuring for the first 5 years, the 14% guaranteed, which they want the tax return, which had been promised at the time of the inception of the GST. So from 2017 to 21, the compensation, and it has been extended because the money realizes there, this compensation cess is included in this 19.9%. So if you net all that out, the cess has gone up from 10.4 to around 16%, which is also a very, very substantial increase. And therefore, this is a very fair question, which you have asked, of whether the cess not being shareable really denies the states an important component of the divisible pool. Alas, I have no answer to it. Why? Because I had no discretion on this. The Constitutional Amendment 2000, 80th Constitutional Amendment, and the one along with it, specifically kept cess and surcharge out of the divisible pool. So what I have said to others, like you, who have discussed this, is that we need to have a concept.
Well, I think due to some connectivity issue, we have lost this connection again. Please wait for a few minutes. Thank you.
So there is. No, it's all right. It's all right. Please.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir.
Sorry about Yes, I'm very sorry. This is not in my hand. So that I have answered the three questions of Shilpa, Chaudhary, and Atisha.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
There's another question from Dr. Manoj from CRRIT Chandigarh. He says that you have tried to address the several issues of dimensions of asymmetric fiscal federalism in India, but keeping in view the prevailing regional problems of development in the country, which indicators would you recommend?
और question answers लेने की जरूरत नहीं है ना, क्या बहुत लंबा हो जाएगा, ठीक है.
So can we take one more question? Or...
It's up to you. I'm in your hands.
Okay, sir. I'll just shoot one more question to you. Thank you. So it says that, so Dr. Manoj says that, in your view, which indicators would you recommend to be included in subsequent central finance commissions so that India achieves the objectives of sustainable development goals and improve its ranking in the Human Development Index?
So I think that Human Development Index is what he is hinting at. And I think very rightly so. Because, yes, Manoj, each year when the UNDP publishes the Global Human Development Index, India ranks pretty low under the Human Development Index. And that is an index which has got a long list of issues on the Human Development Index. But I think that the way forward is not to introduce a new criteria, but if you look at demographic performance as a criteria, what does demographic performance mean? How do you reduce your demography? By investment in education, by investment in health, by investment in girl child. These are three very critical parameters of the Human Development Index themselves. So I think as we go forward, maybe subsequent finance commissions could add a criteria by assigning some mark to one omnibus category called the Index of Human Development. Just as I have done for tax and fiscal effort, they can consider a Human Development Index. And that could be one way which could then further elaborate the issue of demographic management, because a lot of demographic management is about Human Development Index themselves. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I wish this session could go on further, but due to time constraint, we shall need to stop here. Is that fine, sir? Would you like to? No.
Oh, that is fine. I think that I'm profoundly grateful for the time all of you have spared.
Thank you, sir. We thank the audience for their questions. Please accept our apologies for some questions which we could not take up. They were more or less similar. They came in later. It was a great delight to listen to sir by sharing his incisive answers with us. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Taneja sir. Thank you.
It is our proud privilege and fortune to now invite Professor V.K. Malhotra, Member Secretary, Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi, to address the audience. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are not audible. Please unmute yourself, sir. Sir, could you please unmute yourself? We are not able to hear you. Sir, I think you are audible now. Please.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, because I was unmuted at your level, at the level of the administrator. Right, anyway. It was a great experience to join you all this afternoon. And I'm in particular thankful to Shri N.K. Singh ji for his marvelous sharing of his insights in the federal structure that we have and the center-state relations, center-state issues that India, in fact, has got. He could definitely, I think there could not be a better person than him to speak on this issue of center-state fiscal relationships in India. I have gone through some part of the Finance Commission's report submitted to the government, and I could notice from those parts, in fact, in such lecture program, it would be quite an inappropriate thing at my end to continue to discuss what has already been discussed or to talk about some other concerns once the lecture has already been delivered and the questions have been addressed, in fact. But few things that I could notice from that Finance Commission. We know that every Finance Commission faces its own challenges. And the kind of experience that Shri Singh brings with him, being a policy maker and also being an economist and also hailing from the family and also having the background of little politics, I could see his all three works also, namely the New Bihar, Not by Reason Alone, and the Politics of Change. Most of these works, they carry the political economic dimensions of the different issues. And this is what we could find in his Finance Commission also that he has led, the 15th one. I know through a friend of mine, Professor Rameshan, we invited him to 102nd IEA conference at Surat, which he very warmly accepted also. And I remember in the month of December, he had to wait for 3 to 4 long hours, in fact, at airport, but finally the flight got canceled. So let me express my gratitude for having accepted our invitation then, and on behalf of this university also, having accepted our invitation now also. Just a few observations that I would like to make in very brief, and I would not take more than 5 minutes, in fact, in all. As I said, that there could not be a better person. The gap between the policy making and the understanding of economics continues to be there in India. And this is why a person like you definitely was the best possible choice in heading the Finance Commission, also heading the review committee on FRBM, look at its functionality over 12 years, 2003 onwards. The kind of challenges that this commission, in fact, has faced and it was facing, as you very rightly made a mention about, that Jammu Kashmir was converted into a union territory. The working of GST was another important issue. I think some issue which did not figure was related to non-lapsable capital outlay for the defense and internal security needs also. I think something may or could have come on that. I'm very happy to notice that all three basic principles of economics, virtually need, equity, and performance or efficiency, they have been given sufficient scope in these recommendations. Of course, evolution and improvement is an ever-continuing phenomenon. I'm very happy to notice that the kind of challenges that you have listed, some of those challenges being related to the very constitution and the unsettlement of those issues in the constitution. For example, cluttering of things in the 7th schedule. Everybody understands that and I know a number of court cases, including Supreme Court rulings also, that when there is such a non-settlement of the issue, that who prevails upon whom. In those cases, we notice number of judgments have come, but the issue largely remains still unsettled. And the debate shall continue because who has got more resources, who can allocate resources, and who can take better care of the people in those connections, for example, education, health, family planning, as have been very rightly pointed out by you, food or nutritional security, all these issues will continue to be ever important. And there shall continue to be a debate in the country that which government, whether a state government or central government, can take better care of those things. And when I look at your recommendations, third-party evaluation is the point again, which I think if could have figured, and I would have personally loved to listen from you, the third-party assessment. I remember in one of my meetings with the team of the ADB, this issue was highlighted by them. And they raised this issue that in India, for most of the policies, I remember that I've been part of the third-party evaluation of several schemes of the central government. When they, at ICSSR, they came forward with their proposals asking us to evaluate those schemes, but the kind of little time that we get, the kind of somehow feeling that we have to continue with a scheme, and a third party and objective evaluation of a scheme and its functioning has to be definitely very, very honest and very integrated one. Then and then only we could talk in terms of economic efficiencies behind such schemes or their evaluation, or maybe the remedial measures that we are supposed to. I'm very, very happy that all challenges, opportunities have been created, and since we have better availability of resources now than we ever had. And in number of expenses, the new resources are being invested. We know it for definite. And countries' need and aspirations in still newer expenses will continue, and it is a never-ending phenomenon. And every finance commission will be definitely facing such challenges, but the kind of challenges that you have faced and the solution that you have suggested to government taking care of. I'm particularly happy about seeing your indicators on demographic performance, and also in place of forest cover, the indicator moving to forest and ecology also. So there is a wider expanse that this Finance Commission has tried to, and 2.5% weightage being given to tax and the fiscal efforts. I think little more weightage would be the demand in days to come for the future Finance Commission. With these words, I will stop here itself. I'm thankful to the administration of the university led by Honorable Professor N.K. Taneja, who has given me this opportunity to join with all my friends there in the university and listen to Shri N.K. Singh, because we could not listen you there in Surat. I hope to have still more opportunities through the network of ICSSR and also through the network of the economists of the country to have still more insights, maybe candid admissions of what has happened and what has not happened, and maybe frank evaluations of the ongoing things. So just in the interest of the very process of reforms. So I'm thankful to you for being here with us. I have been a part of the CCS University earlier also, and I continue to be a part of that. So I'm thankful to all my friends, Atvir Singh, Dr. Dinesh Kumar, and everyone else who joined us on this afternoon. In fact, I can understand the whole day will be insufficient to understand the dynamics of central-state relations, even on the fiscal aspects. So, but devolution, grant, new issues, and the especially referred issue and fiscal roadmap, all four aspects have been adequately addressed in this Finance Commission report. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I now take this privilege to request the rock-solid pillar of strength of our university, the presiding chair of the event, Professor N.K. Taneja, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Chaudhary Charan Singh University, Meerut, to address the audience and motivate them with his words of wisdom. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bhavnit Batra. Honorable Shri N.K. Singh, the learned, accomplished speaker in this session, the Pro Vice Chancellor of the University, Professor Y. Vimla, the Dean, Faculty of Arts, Professor Naveen Chandra Lohani, Professor V.K. Malhotra, Professor of Economics in this department and also Member Secretary, ICSSR, Professor Atvir Singh, the Organizing Secretary, and of course, Professor Dinesh Kumar, the Head of the Department of Economics of this university. Other distinguished faculty members and students. It has been really a treat and a rewarding experience to have listened to Shri N.K. Singh this forenoon, as he is an established economist, a policy planner, and endowed with huge experience of public life. His address has been really marvelous. I really find myself incapable of adding something to it, but certainly as my experience as a student of economics compels me to think that India's fiscal federalism has definitely been evolving over the past 70 years. That is, in 1951 when the first Finance Commission was constituted. And over this period, this structure has been able to provide identity and scope to various religious, ethnic, and linguistic groups to function. Diverse as India is, marked by glaring disparities in income levels across Indian states, the pure economics principle that the center collects tax revenue on behalf of the states, and that on these grounds of simple pure economics, it has to give back to the states in proportion to what has been collected from different states. But this is pure economics, and we are living in an era of political economy. And moreover, there are issues of India as a nation, which is certainly overriding. And in this context, the divisible pool has to be divided in 4 components. One is pure giving back. Another is redistributing aspect. And third is dealing with shocks. And fourth, reward. The first and fourth are explicitly economic in nature, in as much as that, as I have already said, distribution has to first take care of what has been collected. This is purely economic, but it's really very good that the aspect of nationalism, keeping India together, and Indian entity has taken a front seat, and the redistributing aspect of working of several finance commissions has been at the forefront. And as such, in the 10th Finance Commission, where 23% of the divisible pool went for redistributing, in 14th Finance Commission, this recommendation of redistributing aspects was raised to 13.6%, meaning thereby that if X is to be devolved, if X is to be distributed among states, then out of the 4 criterion, the redistributing aspect got the weightage of 31.6%. And it is happy to note that 15th Finance Commission, under the chairmanship of our learned speaker, Shri Singh, has gone a step forward, wherein the ongoing changes in expectation of people at large, particularly in view of the pace at which development has been taking place, and with rising per capita incomes over the past 70 years, these expectations of people from lower level tier 3 governments have been on the rise. People expect good services from rural and urban local governments. And it is rightly so that reward to local and tier 3 government bodies has been not only been introduced, but also placed at a reasonably good levels. Even our city of Meerut is also a beneficiary. There has been a big problem with regard to poor delivery of services by local bodies, and that was largely because of the fact, as Shri Singh has also pointed out, that GST has subsumed the sources of revenue of the local bodies, and therefore a devolution to local governments was a must. It's really in fitness of things. Similarly, we are living under times of shocks, and the power of the central government to deal with these shocks has to be re-examined. There was a good amount of discussion by earlier speakers in respect of over-centralization of our federal structure. As a student of economics, I would only say that the purpose of economics is guiding resource allocation in such a manner that maximum efficiency is achieved. Now, if we take a look at, this is with regard to concurrent list. If we take a look at many areas of functionality which are assigned to the state governments and then assess their efficiency, we really find that the relative efficiency of expenditure allocated by central government is at much higher level. For the sake of example, we can compare the efficiency of central universities vis-a-vis state universities. Similarly, as students of economics, we must compare the efficiency of expenditure in primary education, school education, by the central and the state bodies. When we compare, I just throw open a hypothesis. We will definitely reach the conclusion that central government organs have been performing at a much higher level of efficiency. And that's why the concurrent list scope needs to be further enlarged. This is my suggestion, this is a hypothesis. And I'm of the opinion that be it competitive or cooperating federalism, the purpose, the objective should be to keep India going at a high pace of efficiency of resource utilization. I am sure the discussions of this type shall go a long way in sharpening our understanding and definitely reaching fruitful policy prescriptions. Formal vote of thanks will be proposed by the head of the department, but I really find it difficult to resist the temptation of expressing my heartfelt gratefulness to our learned speaker, Shri N.K. Singh, who has covered a large number of very relevant aspects, and the students, the academic community in this university will definitely be benefited by his deliberations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Your aura has lent a unique charm to the event. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the last part of the event. Hope you had an enjoyable time. Finally, it is my proud privilege to call upon Professor Dinesh Kumar, Head of Department of Economics, TCS University, to propose the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bhavnit Singh Batra. Sincere duty and privilege also to ask him of thanks to all the dignitaries, all the authorities, faculty members of the department, faculty members of different other departments of the university, faculty members as well as dignitaries and authorities of different other universities, alumni of this department, all the students who have been benefited by the lecture, the authoritative lecture delivered by Shri N.K. Singh sir, all the support extending to this special lecture organized by the department as well as by the university. Initially, Honorable Vice Chancellor of the university, Professor N.K. Taneja sir, no doubt my mentor and teacher, Shri N.K. Singh sir, Chairperson of the 15th Finance Commission, as has already been pointed out by Professor V.K. Malhotra, that there has been noticed the gap between the policy making and the understanding of the economics. To minimizing that gap, Professor Shri N.K. Singh sir, the lecture was really not only for saying it was a wonderful lecture, and we all, as has Honorable Vice Chancellor has already been submitted, that we all have added to our knowledge much what we were expecting and what we have been delivered. It was really a wonderful lecture. Honorable Professor V.K. Malhotra, my senior colleague in the Department of Economics, Chaudhary Charan University, Meerut, Member Secretary of Indian Council of Social Science Research, Honorable Co-Vice Chancellor of this university, Madam Professor Y. Bimla, Organizing Secretary of this event, this special lecture, and my teacher, Professor Atvir Singh, the faculty members of this department, Dr. Sapna Jain, Dr. Rupesh Tyagi, Dean Faculty of Arts, Professor N.C. Loni Sahab, the key person holding this event successfully, Shri Bhavnit Singh Batra and his team, Dr. Sanjeev Kumar from Lucknow, Dr. Sandeep Balyan from Lucknow, Dr. Lokesh Kumarji, no doubt Dr. Vanda Jain, Dr. Manoj Kumar Tewatia from CCRD Chandigarh, Dr. Upasna Sharma from Nainital, Dr. Virendra Singh, Dr. Renu Rana, Dr. Prateek Dhaiya, Professor Vijay Jaiswal, Head Department of Education, Dr. Prem Singh, Dr. Vandana Bhardwaj, and a number of persons whose name I'm not able to take up here. It is really a lecture which has opened our eyes from multi-dimensional perspectives, as Professor has already been pointed out. That number of dimensions, number of structural parameters have been discussed in this lecture. N.K. Singh sir discussed about the various objectives, various recommendations in terms of gross tax revenue, as well as in terms of GRR, that is gross revenue receipts. He has unfolded many aspects, not only from the point of view of the students, but from the point of view of the faculty of economics, who are working in the different aspects of this field as well as not working in the specific field of public finance, but they are having the specific knowledge as a student of economics. What Shri N.K. Singh Sahab has suggested about the stability, continuity, and predictability as the major objective of this finance commission process, it is really very, you can say, it has unfolded many aspects from us. When he submitted that before taking charge as the chairperson of this finance commission, the census data of 1971 was in use, I was in shock. It was first information for me. I was not aware about this fact, and it was again things to be noticed from that angle. When he specified about the process of allocation on the basis of the priorities, that is, on the basis of need-based priorities, or can say need baskets, performance and efficiency baskets, as well as on the basis of equity basket, it was really the structure, the design, the recommendations, as well as what we observed from the lecture. It was a complete lecture, and I request in the capacity of the head department of economics to Shri N.K. Singh Sahab that your blessings are not only till now or till date. Your blessings will go to the extent with the audience what we are having here, and we hope that your blessings will always be on our department as well as on our university. I extend a heartiest vote of thanks to Shri N.K. Singh Sahab for accepting the invitation and sparing the valuable time and enlighten us for these insights about the functioning and recommendations as well as design and structure of Finance Commission's process. I extend my heartiest thanks to the Honorable Vice Chancellor and my teacher, Professor N.K. Taneja sir, for giving us this opportunity, giving the department this opportunity for being benefited for this authoritative lecture. I extend my heartiest thanks to Professor V.K. Malhotra, my senior colleague of this department, and presently serving as the member secretary of Indian Economic Association, for giving the wonderful lecture as well as for sparing the time for the department and the university. We are really obliged, sir. I extend my heartiest thanks to Professor Atvir Singh, my teacher, senior professor of the department, and organizing secretary of this event, for giving me this opportunity, as well as for providing this platform, this rich platform for the students as well as the faculty of the department and the different members of this program, that they could have been beneficiary of the wonderful lecture by Shri N.K. Singh Sahab. I extend my heartiest thanks to Madam Professor Y. Bimlaji, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor. I extend my heartiest thanks to Professor N.C. Lohani Sahab, Dean Faculty of Arts, as well as I extend my special thanks to Shri Bhavnit Singh Batra for organizing this event in a nice way, and his whole team who has worked so that each nut and bolt of the program are working in a systematic and planned manner. I should not forget the name of Shri Sandeep Agarwal. The technical support has been provided by Shri Sandeep Agarwal on behalf of the university. Finally, I would like to congratulate this university, this department, the student of the department, and Professor Atvir Singh sir for organizing this wonderful event and making us beneficiary, academic beneficiary basically. This was a heavy dose for all of us, and we will try our best to get it digested in a way as it has been suggested or it has been planned. Thank you very much, sir. It's all from my side. Thanks a lot. Thanks to all, sir. It's over to Bhavnit.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all. We are now going to end the meeting for everybody. Thanks once again.